guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Amy. I am a mum of 2 boys and really happen to love books. So if you'd like to see some more bookish content from my channel and my cozy little corner of the internet, then please consider liking and subscribing. It really means so much. Welcome to my October wrap up. Now this was a really good reading month. I branched out a little bit and got into my horror era, but it's made me realise that I'm definitely not into some horror. This was a journey, let's just say that. But I am really proud of how much I read this month. So shall we go through my Storygraph statistics for October? So in October I read 5 books totaling 1,822 pages. Moods were dark, mysterious, funny, tense and light-hearted. Pace, I had 1 fast-paced, 1 slow-paced and 3 medium-paced. Page number, I read 1 book that was less than 300 pages, 3 books that were 300 to 499 pages, and 1 book that was 500 plus pages. All fiction, as per usual for me. Genres were horror, classics, thriller, literary and fantasy. All physical books, and my average rating for October was 3.6 stars. So not the best, but not the worst. I didn't have any 5-star books this month, which I'm kind of sad about because I really wanted to find a 5-star read this month, but I had a fair few 4 stars. So without further ado, grab yourself a cozy hot drink or cold, entirely up to you. Grab a fuzzy blanket and let's jump into all the books I read in October. So the first book I read, I decided not to jump right in with the horror, so I decided to pick up a cozy fantasy instead, and that was A Fellowship of Bakers and Magic by J. Penner. I rated this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Doesn't quite live up to Legends and Lattes, which I think for a lot of people is one of my favourite cozy fantasies of all time. This was fantastic though. It was so sweet, and there are more books in this series, so I'm hoping that I can carry on very soon. So we are following our FMC, Arletta, and she has been struggling to sell her baked goods. She is a very good baker, but she is trying to handle everything on her own. She lost her parents at a very young age, and she's been trying to tackle everything on her own with a little bit of help from her next door neighbours who have kind of become her adoptive dads. Arletta, she's been struggling for a while, but she gets the surprise of her life one day when a very handsome elf named Theo comes knocking at her door and says, "I'm here to take you to the Langheim baking competition." And she said, "Well, you have to enter for that. I haven't entered." And that's when her adoptive dads / neighbours turned to her and said, "We put you in because we love your baking so much and we think you do really well." They then set off, her and Theo then set off on this journey together to get to Langheim, and she ends up competing for more than just a bake-off title, and it's just, oh, I loved it so much. There's found family in this. There's not enemies to lovers, but kind of disliked acquaintances between Arletta and Theo. And because in the baking competition it is usually just for beings who have magic, and Arletta being a human, she doesn't have magic, this is a very rare occasion for the Langheim Bake Off. So it's all about fulfilling your potential and not needing magic to do that. And it's such an uplifting, light-hearted book, and I would definitely recommend it if you want some more cozy fantasies to read. Now this is when I entered my horror phase of October, and I thought there was going to be no better time to do it than the spooky season. So I kicked it off with a really good one. It was another 4-star read, and it is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Now there were some dark bits in it, and I did struggle a little bit with some parts, but overall this reminded me, I think this is compared to, yes, that's it, like an unholy hybrid of Beaches and The Exorcist, and I could not agree more. Having watched Beaches but not watched The Exorcist, but I have read it, which we will talk about in a little bit. I couldn't agree more that this is a hybrid of Beaches and The Exorcist. So we follow 2 best friends. We follow Gretchen and Abby. They have been best friends since they were about 5 years old. They've been joined at the hip. And then one day, Gretchen, Abby and their group of friends decide to go skinny dipping. But then Gretchen goes missing. Gone missing in the woods somewhere. And when Abby and their group of friends eventually find Gretchen, she is different. She is not the same Gretchen as she was when she went into those woods. And Abby ends up getting a lot of the blame for what happened to Gretchen, which then sends Abby's life into turmoil and everything just starts crashing down around her. And it's just proof that it's not as cool as it sounds having a demon in your best friend's body. Like, it's really not as cool as it sounds. This does kind of remind me of Stranger Things with like the cover and the setting and everything like that. But this is a story about friendship and sticking by your best friend and doing whatever you can to save them, even if they are possessed by some kind of demon. And I'm not gonna spoil the ending, but I was crying by the end of this book, and I wasn't expecting to cry. So if you want something that reminds you a lot of an 80s movie, but is about friendship, but also with a little bit of horror mixed in, definitely read this by Grady Hendrix. Speaking of exorcisms, I read The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. I rated this 3 stars. I almost rated it 2. I struggled with this one, you guys. I really, really struggled. It made me realise why I am not into horror. Yeah. This was tough. This was really tough, but I pushed through. I was speaking to my best friend Emma about this because she is really big into horror, and the amount of gifs that I sent her of just people like gagging, because that's how I felt reading this. I struggled so many times and I was so close to putting this book down. So close, but I pushed through, ended up giving it 3 stars. So we follow Reagan, and she is a seemingly normal 10-year-old girl, nearly 11, and then she suddenly starts experiencing strange things, and strange things start happening around her house, like abnormally heavy furniture moving across the floor, and Reagan being 10, nearly 11, there is no way she could possibly move it. Scratching coming from the ceiling, different phenomenon that's really starting to bug her mum and Reagan as well. So this phenomenon starts, and that it then turns into Reagan's personality completely changing, and she sees so many different psychiatrists who all seem to think it stemmed from Reagan's parents divorcing and it's a trauma response. Then a priest named Damien Karras sends an exorcist around because he thinks there is absolutely no other option. All the other avenues have been explored. Medications, hospital stays, they've all been explored, and finally this priest says no, she needs an exorcism, this isn't working. So yeah, that is the main premise of the book. And after reading this, I did have Legion, which is the second book in the series, on my list, and I decided not to. I just couldn't do it. I don't want to continue on any further with this, so I'm gonna leave it at that. Now, next up, this is the biggest book I think I have ever read, and I actually loved it. I actually really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I did struggle a little bit with the language because it was written in like the 19th century, so I did struggle a little bit with the language, but I thought it was an absolutely stunning book. Dracula by Bram Stoker. I have had this on my TBR for so long and thought that this would be the perfect time to read it, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. The one thing that did surprise me though is that the actual character of Dracula rarely makes an appearance. Very, very rarely. So that was one thing that did surprise me. I thought Dracula would make more appearances in this book, but he actually doesn't. So we follow Jonathan Harker, and he is a solicitor, and he has been sent by his boss to overlook the sale of some properties that this Count Dracula has purchased. So he goes to Count Dracula's castle in Transylvania, and he ends up being trapped as a prisoner there after realising that Count Dracula is in fact a vampire or some kind of paranormal beast. He eventually gets released, but he is so traumatised by what he has seen, he thinks that he has a fever on it of the brain, basically. So his fiancée, who then turns into his wife, Mina, goes to visit him, and she believes him. A lot of people would say that he was crazy, but she actually believes what happened after reading his journal entries. Now, every single chapter is a different excerpt. So we've got Jonathan Harker's journal, we have Mina's journal, and then we have a very special appearance from Dr. Van Helsing, which, oh my god, it was so cool seeing these characters from like pop culture that I've seen all throughout my childhood growing up. Like there is the film Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman and Kate Beckinsale in, and I just, seeing his name, I was like, oh, that's where it came from. This was stunning. I really like this. The only two things I wish is that, one, the actual character of Dracula made more of an appearance, but I think that kind of adds to the ominous mood and not knowing what's going to happen and when he's going to show up. I think it does add to that, but that's just my personal preference. I kind of wish he made more of an appearance. And two, the ending was absolutely beautiful, but I wish, now this is going to be a spoiler, I wish the demise of Dracula had been dragged out a little bit more. It felt like it was just a couple of paragraphs and then that was it. So I just wish that had a bit more body put into it. But other than that, it was an absolutely stunning book. So we are on to my last book. Now, what I forgot to mention in this video is I do have a DNF. So I will go through that last. But the last book that I read in October, the last full book I read in October, was Graveyard Shift by M.L. Rio. Now, I have heard so many good things about If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, so I really had high hopes for this, but I was a little bit disappointed, you guys. I rated it 3 stars. So the premise of this book is that a group of university students are in a churchyard having a smoke because they are not allowed to on the university campus. And while in the churchyard, they find a freshly dug grave, and they do not know why. There's no funerals that have happened. And then after they do a little bit more research and they wait and see why this grave has been dug, they find rats with fungus growing out of them. So they try to find the reason why these rats have been put in this empty grave, and most importantly, who is doing it. There wasn't much plot to this. The actual plot was very sparse, I found, and I felt like it was more of a character study on the life of university students and all the crap they have to put up with, and how they all have their own personal struggles and how that brings them closer together as a group. The plot was very just here, dotted here and there. It wasn't fluid throughout the story, I found. So I probably will try If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, but I wasn't very impressed with this one. And the last book that I attempted to read, and I couldn't, I just could not finish this. I think I got about 60 pages in, and this is a novella, bearing in mind. I got 60 pages in and I gave up. I could not do it anymore. The Rats by James Herbert. This was just pure gore, and I do not like gore. I hate it. There was nothing scary about this. It was just pure, disgusting gore. And it's about these abnormally large rats that seem to eat vulnerable people alive and people who are in vulnerable situations. And the reason why, one of the reasons why I could not finish this is because there was a scene. Now this is a spoiler. If you want to read this, do not listen, put your fingers in your ears or skip past this part entirely. There was a scene with a 1-year-old baby being eaten in this. And the mother's just torment of seeing her baby being eaten alive by rats and trying to take them to the hospital covered in blood so she could try and save them. It's making me want to gag just thinking about it. That is the age of my youngest son. My youngest son is 1. a week tomorrow. He is nearly 1 year old. And thinking about that and how that makes me feel as a mother just made me want to burst into tears crying. So that was my sign that I was not comfortable reading this, so I decided not to continue. If you like gore, read it, because I can see the appeal to someone who loves gore, but this just was not for me. So I will not be reading any more of this book or any more of this series, unfortunately. So that was my October wrap up. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I'm sorry it is coming out a little bit later than normal. It's going to be time for my November wrap up soon, and I've only read one book so far. I've nearly finished another, but we'll see how we get on. So please don't forget to like and subscribe if you have enjoyed this video, and I will see you very soon in the next one. Bye!